following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Let's go, baby!
Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Are you ready for a break?
Absolutely.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, and so much for that.
It's time for The Break on DallasCowboys.com.
We were on a break!
It is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020, Season 16, Episode number 63. Welcome to the latest edition of The Break. I'm Derek Eagleton, live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. Got my new crew with me, and I'm actually thinking about trading out. Like, I might want to keep these dudes because if you listen to our show yesterday, man, we had a really good conversation yesterday, and today we're going to jump into the defense, so you know it's going to be a good conversation. Isaiah Stanback, Barry Church, Kurt Daniels, welcome to the show. Let's get this thing going because I don't want to waste too much time here. Real quick before we start talking about the defense, I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is a bye week for the Cowboys, but due to some COVID issues that are going on with the Steelers, the Cowboys have had to miss some of their practices this week, particularly today. They're doing some stuff virtually. That being said, and I really want to hear, nothing against you, Kurt, I want to hear from you too, but from the guys that used to play, I want to hear during a bye week, is the most important thing trying to regenerate your body and get rest, or do you take advantage? Is it more important to take advantage of an opportunity to get that extra practice, especially a team that's not performing very well? Let's start with you, Barry.
For me, it all depended on what year I was in. As a young guy, as a rookie, I was trying to get, acclimated with the NFL, and I always needed that extra practice time because for me, I learned better on the field. I didn't learn as good, in the classroom and, taking notes and stuff. I learned better by actually doing it on the field. So as a young guy, I needed that extra reps. I needed that extra practice time during the bye week. But as I got older and got more acclimated to the NFL and how we were running things in the playbook, pretty much stayed the same defensive wise. So as an older guy, I was like, man, I need all the rest I can get. If we get one practice that week, I was happy with it. I was kicking my feet up the rest of the week and just watching football. So for me, it just where you're at in your career wise, younger, older. But to me, as an older guy, I love taking those days off.
Isaiah.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think it really depends on where you're at in your career. I know I had a ton of injuries, so I was always nursing something anyways. But as you get a little bit older, you need some time for your body to kind of revamp and get ready. There's really not that much time off during a bye week. I don't know. Every organization treats it differently, so I think typically in a bye week you might get the weekend off. You might just get a long weekend, depending on your coach. So 3 days off. But aside from that, man, this team, they don't need a whole lot of time off. They do need to get out there and run some reps, but at the same time, they do need to get healthy. That's a fine little dance between the coaches and the trainers.
Yeah, and the really interesting.
Hey, Derek, I'm old. If you could arrange some time off for me, I appreciate that too.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, Kurt, I know how important this bye week is for our group and what we do in the media. Like, this is a week we really need to regenerate because we go from training camp till the season's over. So this is a good time to be able to rest, recuperate, and actually spend a little bit of that time, as we were talking about before we went on the show, doing those honeydews and making sure the wife is happy at home because she's been pulling the weight. She's been pulling the weight all this time. So, but the interesting thing about this year, particularly with COVID, is that, usually, and you guys know as former players, and I think sometimes even for us that work in the organization, it's an opportunity to be able to get away a little bit. You may travel to a place and spend a little time with your family. You may go and visit your old college if they got a big game coming up. How much do you think that affects them just mentally, not being able to get away because of all the COVID concerns? And if I'm not mistaken, I think they actually have to continue being tested every day throughout this period. So it's not like they can just get out of town. How much does that affect these guys' ability to be able to regenerate? Let's start with you, Barry.
For me, I think it would have, just going by experience of myself, I think it would affect them a lot. I knew, especially as I got older and I kind of knew the playbook, I loved that time to just get away, just kind of cut away from the NFL. I mean, you're entrenched in it from, training camp all the way until the end of the season, and you're just banging against each other and talking football 24/7. So for me, I loved just cutting away, getting to spend time with my family. I wouldn't even watch football until Sunday. I wouldn't watch the college games or anything. I would just enjoy life and hanging out. So for those guys to not be able to do that, they got to do those COVID testings, and I don't even think they're able to leave, the state or anything like that. I'm not sure on that, but I think that would be kind of hard just to get a cutaway, just kind of recharge and just re-energize the body to get ready to finish the season was huge for me. So I can tell with these guys, it can be a big disadvantage.
Kurt?
Yeah, I never left town. So all the bye weeks that I've had in my career, I never left town. I was always hanging around. I didn't come to the facility if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
But, like Barry said, the ability to just be able to detach and kind of just, recalibrate in a sense where you're just at the house chilling, watching movies, right? Like even just watching movies, that's a vacation. Because you always had a mental guilt if you're watching a movie or watching some TV at the house. I should be using that time to watch film, right, and get ready for the next opponent. So even just doing that to me was like that was heaven, and getting on some doggone video games, that was everything for me.
Yeah, I do wonder, I don't know if fans really know how much time these guys spend. I think a lot of people feel like they come out, they go to practice, they have a meeting, and then they go home. And the amount of time you spend as an NFL player, you might get a little time in the off season where you kind of can do some things and you don't have to worry about stuff every day, all day. But during the season, man, it is a long, long day for these guys. Mm-hmm. And being able to bear, I think I kind of agree with you on the way I approach it. Like I might not even tune into anything regarding football for like 2 days just because I just want to give my mind a mental break from football so that you can then come back and be ready to be re-energized by it. And it's a lot when that's all you do every day, 7 days a week with no real break starting at training camp all the way through the time you get a bye. Let's go ahead and jump into this.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
go ahead, Barry.
No. I was just going to add on. We can go ahead and jump into these topics.
All right, let's jump into this defense. Let's talk about we got a lot of stuff to talk about on the defense. I'm going to start with a bigger picture question, though. What do you think has been the biggest problem? If you go back through the whole 9 weeks, and I know things have changed at times. They've played better over the last couple weeks, but just overall, what do you think, if you had to identify one thing, has been their biggest problem with this defense? Let's start with you, Kurt.
Well, I think coming into this year, they needed a defense that really just needed to be average. They had such a high power offense that if they just had an average defense, they'd be fine. They could be a contender. Obviously, that didn't happen. And to me, I think the talent may have been average. I mean, you had some studs in DeMarcus Lawrence, some other guys here and there, but overall, maybe you had the talent there to be an average defense. The problem, to me, I'm wondering, was it more kind of mental? The mistakes in the assignments, the mistakes in gap control, the mistakes in coverage, the eyes in the backfield, all that stuff we've heard. And I wonder if that was the bigger problem, not the physical part of it, but the mental part of it. Now, Barry and Isaiah would know much better than me, but that's what I would assume has been happening.
Isaiah.
Yeah, I'm going to go with communication and responsibility. So you saw there was a lack of execution of one's responsibility, especially on his front seven, right? Particularly this defensive line. And then as we get into the back end of things in terms of the defensive backs, there was a lack of communication. And these guys just weren't getting basic coverages communicated, and it ended up costing them, extremely bad in some senses, and through those first games, especially where they were getting just torched. Everybody points a finger at Diggs, and coach, kept putting him in man-to-man coverage, and he just happens to be playing against the best guy on the other opposing team. So yeah, a lot of times he received the blunt end of that. But communication on the back end and responsibility and execution on the front line, I think those are the biggest areas of that need to be addressed.
Barry.
And for me, I'm going to have to agree with both Kurt and Isaiah on this one. I think it's all up top. I think it's mental, and I think it's communication. I mean, look, we can get into the excuses. We can say, they didn't have OTAs, they didn't have, mini camps, and they had abbreviated training camp and no preseason games. We can get into those excuses, but overall, I just think it was a huge communication error. I mean, you didn't have that time to pretty much nail down this defensive scheme or this defensive game plan going into the year. I mean, usually you would have, this year we would have had 5 preseason games, and I think we would have been able to get out the majority of the kinks before we got into the regular season. Now, with that being said, you would feel as though we've had enough regular season games to where some of those kinks would have already been out, but we continue to struggle a lot until these last couple weeks. Will I say it's fixed? I'm not quite there yet to say it's fixed. I know we've played a little bit better, but as a unit, we're still seeing wide receivers running wide open in the secondary. And I don't think that has a talent issue because, I mean, in the past, we've had, all pros here and all pros there. And I don't think they dipped off that much within a year. So to me, it has to be this communication errors between players. And maybe it's between coaches and players as well. But they have to get this thing straightened out if we want to salvage this season at all.
Let me ask you this question, and this can be specifically to Bear, but if you guys, other guys have some answers on this, I'd love to hear it. Have you gone through situations where you had to have a coaching change and it meant that you were changing your defensive scheme? And how did that work from the standpoint of not only personally how you adapted to it, but how your other teammates adapted to it as well? How long did it take you to really do that so that we can get a perspective of, was this team just not focused enough, or was it really just a matter of this is a tough thing to do, and with all the limitations due to COVID, it's just pretty much impossible for them to do it well in a short period of time?
Well, for me, the one time I did experience this coaching change, and it was midway through my rookie season when we had Wade, and he was fired midway through, and I believe Pascaloni had taken over. And during that Wade time that I was there, we struggled as a defense. I think we were 1-6, and we were dead last in defense. And then Pascaloni took over, and he basically dumbed it down. He made it as simple as possible, and he let us just go out there and stop all the thinking and just play 100 miles an hour. And we ended up finishing the year, I believe, 5-3, and that's how Jason Garrett had came to be the head coach. But defensively, he just dumbed down the system for us, and we were able to fly around. So a lot of people said a lot of things about Marinelli's system and how it was too vanilla, but I believe those guys, they were flying around. You saw multiple hats at the ball each and every time. There was less thinking out there involved in his system, but hopefully they got all the kinks out with this Mike Nolan defense, and we can continue to ride this momentum.
Isaiah, do you think that they've solved their problems? We saw them play a lot better against Pittsburgh. Do you think the problems have been solved at this point?
I can't say that they're solved. I can say that they're heading in the right direction. You could tell that this team is starting to communicate a little bit better. You could tell that their scheme has changed drastically. I know Kyle and I touched on yesterday in the film room, right? So instead of we're not running 3 down anymore, we're running 4 down. So you heard the murmurs coming out of the locker room of guys not really feeling that 3-4. Well, guess what? It seemingly is gone, right? Guys are playing in a system that they're more that they're typically used to now, right? Linebackers have 3 linebackers on the field instead of 2 linebackers on the field, right? And the secondary, it was already running basic coverages, but it seems like they're communicating better. So I think everything's heading in the right direction. I think the Pittsburgh game he was going to give them some confidence going forward, because obviously the Philly game as well. So the last 2 weeks we've been able to build some momentum, and hopefully, like Barry said, this can continue.
Yeah,
do you think that
go ahead, Kurt.
You mentioned the last couple of games they've looked better. Is that a product of having Van Der Esch back? Has he kind of settled things down a little bit in the middle?
I don't think so. I think it's more. I don't want to take anything away from Van Der Esch, but I think it's more of a testament to Poe and Griffin being gone. I think there's a lot of weight that's placed on those veterans being there, and the expectations that you place on those veterans, and then when they don't fulfill those, as a young guy, kind of waiting in the wings. I kind of say it when I was here in Dallas, right? And I come in and there's Terry Glenn and Terrell Owens and Patrick Creighton, and I'm sitting here like, okay, whatever they do, that's what I'm supposed to do. Right, like I'm trying to figure things out, and once guys like that are out the way, it's like, oh, so I get to kind of create it now. Cool, this is how I do it, and you've just kind of seen that take place over the last 2 weeks. You saw Gallimore. Look at the energy he was bringing on the line, and Hamilton and these guys, and D-Law has always been bringing it, but now he has other guys that are bringing it with him. So it's a very contagious type of energy and effort, and want to, right? So just like we talked about Pittsburgh coming into it, just like we talked about Washington's defensive line, there's a certain energy that comes with that, and then things will really start falling in place because that's the way guys really want to play. Guys want to fly around, they want to hit, they want to run fast, they want to cover, and they don't want to be sitting up there thinking about what all their responsibilities are.
Yeah, as I went back and watched the film on that last game, what you noticed, what I think was so apparent, was the fact that Gallimore and Hamilton were really, really playing stout on the defensive line. They were not getting moved around, and it allowed the linebackers to better fit into the gaps where they were supposed to be. You didn't see situations where defensive linemen were getting moved, and now offensive linemen are on linebackers, and linebackers can't get off blocks, and it creates these huge gaps. That's what we saw for really the first 7 games of the season. Last week, week before last, I think it started to flip just a little bit. Last week, I think it was really, really a stark difference. And I think Gallimore was a guy that, as you said, his energy, he was able to not only just kind of not be moved, but he was actually disruptive. I saw this one play. I don't know if you guys saw the one where he tossed Pouncey. And I was like, wow, because Pouncey is not that is a good center. He is one of the better centers in the league, and he tossed him and went to the quarterback. And so I think it's not just the guys that got rid of; it's the guys that have stepped up in their places and are playing better at this point that's making this defense so much better. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this defense. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that have been changes for this defense, particularly with the coaching and the scheme and the offseason training and not having it, and which one of those things we think have had the biggest impact on them not being able to perform as well to start the season. We'll do it when we come right back. This is DallasCowboys.com radio.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Varilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
Since 1865, Stetson hats are American-made with pride right here in Texas. And Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Want to show your Texas and team pride too? You can. By purchasing your own Stetson, you can look just like how the flag guys do on field at every home game. Stetson hats, the official crown of all self-respecting Cowboys, and your favorite football team.
Get yours today at shop.dallascowboys.com or at stetson.com.
I'm Jay Novacek, former tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Back in the day, I was the guy who always got the tough yards, and that's why I run with John Deere today. In fact, I have a John Deere 3025E tractor that can handle any yard work I need to do, even the tough yards way out back. So if you have 1 acre or 1,000, John Deere has the equipment that's just right for you. Visit a John Deere dealer today and run with us. We are the official tractor provider of your Dallas Cowboys.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
Back to the break.
Unified welterweight world champion Errol the Truth Spence Jr. will duel 2-division world champion Danny Swift Garcia in a blockbuster event this Saturday, December 5th at AT&T Stadium. Get your tickets now before they sell out at SeatGeek.com. All right, welcome back to the second segment of the Break Live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. We're talking defense today. Got my crew, Isaiah, Barry, and Kurt here with me. And we talked a little bit about some of the problems that this defense has. Here's another question I have for you on those problems. How much do you attribute the problems that they've had to each of these 3 things? Having a new defensive coordinator, Mike Nolan, and let's be clear, Mike Nolan, if you go back and look at his history, he wasn't great in his last few stops as a defensive coordinator. So how much does he affect that? Or having a new scheme, or having a new scheme with no off-season training? Let's start first with you, Isaiah.
I'm going to go with the new D coordinator with the new scheme. So that's what I'm going to roll with. I think both of those play a huge part into, the effectiveness of this team and how they're able to get going early or the lack thereof. I think there was a lot of resentment, a lot of pushback in terms of accepting what he was trying to initiate here, and it's unfortunate, especially when you take into account veterans. Veterans have a way that they've done things, right? You heard it come out with Griffin making that comment around week 3 or 4, where he was just like, I'm a hand in the ground type of guy. It's like, okay, but coach says that you're not right now. So I think there was a lot of pushback in terms of guys just accepting that this is the way it's going to be. It was kind of like the Mandalorian. This is the way, and guys weren't vibing with it at first.
Yep. Kurt.
True. Yeah, I agree with that. We heard early on that that they would go to fit the scheme around the players, but it seemed like they did the exact opposite for a while. That they were trying to fit guys in square, round pegs into square holes or whatever, and then maybe it took them a little while to kind of figure that out. So. Really, Derek, I think it's kind of all three. You've got a new coordinator, you've got a new scheme. They had no offseason really to implement it. The communication problems that Isaiah was talking about earlier, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And finally now, maybe the first 4 or 5 games, I think Barry said, maybe that was your preseason in a way. So maybe now they're trying to, they've figured out who can do what we need to do better, who fits where better, and the communication is improving. So hopefully it'll only improve as we keep going.
Barry.
For me, I'm gonna go with Kurt on this one. I think it's kind of a mixture of all three things, but I'm gonna lean specifically on the no off season. I mean, if you think about it, this off season usually starts around March. You have your captain's workouts, and with a new scheme, a new philosophy, all that stuff, you can get the ball rolling with that way back in March. This defensive coordinator can get how he feels, how his philosophy, how he wants his players to play. He can get it entrenched in them early in March and have all OTAs, all mini camp, training camp, and preseason to pretty much entrench how his beliefs into them. I take it back to when I played, and we went from having Rob Ryan as our defensive coordinator to Rob Marinelli, and they were complete opposites. I mean, Rob Marinelli was, look, I don't have to coach effort. I shouldn't have to tell you to run to the ball. You should play for the name on the back of your jersey. And so going into that season, that's what everybody thought. That's what we believed. That's what the philosophy was as a team. But we had that whole offseason. We had that whole training camp and preseason for Marinelli to basically entrench his belief about non-loafing. If you get knocked down, treat the field like a hot stove and get up and running. And I think that helped us transition into his defense. And we ended up playing pretty well his first couple years there. So for me, I have to say it's a mixture of all three, but specifically I'm going to have to go with the no offseason.
Yeah, and I think that even plays even more, Barry, when you mentioned a little earlier the fact that you were the type of learner where you needed to do things more so than just hearing them told to you, right? And so when you start even thinking about the difference between visual learners and audio learners, and then you throw in the other part of being people that learn best from doing, like you got a lot of different types of learning styles in that room between all those men that play defense, right? And not having the ability to have them in the facility and be able to cater more to their learning styles means everybody's got to learn the same way. For those people that can learn by Zoom, it works, right? But those that can't, you're in a really tough situation trying to figure this all out heading into a new season. All right, so let's move on to the next question. This one's going to be looking forward a little bit. Let's look beyond the season. Which position on the defense do you think is most in need of a makeover this offseason? And I'm going to throw out 3 positions for you. Feel free to throw in another if you think these don't hit the spot. But I'm thinking cornerback, linebacker, or defensive tackle. Let's start with you, Barry.
For me, I'm gonna have to lean on the D tackle for this one. I mean, at corners, I know we have a lot of free agents. I think Lewis and Cheeto are both up after this year. But we got a little bit. We got youth in there as well with Trayvon Diggs. So I feel like corner, we might be able to be okay at the corner position. At linebacker, we're entrenched in the contract with Alden Smith. We have a young Vander Esch there still, so I feel like we're pretty good at the linebacker position. But defensive tackle, the middle of the defense, the heart of the defense, I felt struggled for the majority part of this season until we kind of got those veteran guys up out of there. And I think we found a young star. Well, we'll see what he has in these next couple of games, but I think we found a young star in Neville Gallimore, just seeing what he was able to do against Marcus Pouncey, as you guys were talking earlier. But I think we have one right there, but I think we need another one. Tyrone Crawford, who has been, a stalwart of this defense the past couple of years, he just hasn't played up to par to what we're used to seeing at that defensive tackle position. So I think you have to address that need. It's the middle of the defense. It's what's been causing us, giving us headaches in this rushing attack against our defense. So for me, I got to lean on the D tackle for this one.
Isaiah.
I got a copy with my man BC. You can't get much done. You can't get much accomplished in this NFL without a stout line, whether it's offensive line or defensive line. And obviously, we're speaking about the defensive side of the ball. So D-line, if your D-line shot, if your D-line can't be productive, if they can't stop somebody from running the ball, if you can't get to the quarterback, then guess what? You're probably going to struggle in almost every phase, every stat sheet, right, on that side of the ball. And, obviously we've had our woes at that position to date. Cornerback needs some help as well, but I think that cornerback position, we have a lot of young talent there that just simply needs reps, and they need continuity, and they need understanding of what they're doing in this league and get updated on the speed. But the defensive line position, obviously we've lost 3 veterans there. 3. Right, if you take into McCoy into account, we got McCoy, you got Poe, so we've lost some guys that we were really planning on relying on, and the guys that we're supposed to be leaning on, they're kind of up there in age too, right? So you mentioned Crawford, he's gonna get phased out, right? He's getting paid a lot of money. They're not gonna pay him that going forward. You got Gallimore, who you just drafted. Hey, they seemingly hit on that, right? He was struggling a little bit early on, but you could tell he just wasn't acclimated to the speed of the game and the size and the strength of these guys. But guess what? He figured it out, right? He figured it out. And now seemingly he is coming on. He's getting his confidence. So if you're going to revamp a position, it definitely has to be the D-line. Get some other dudes in here. I think you still mix in a couple veterans, but you mix in some high energy, high effort veterans, because I think that's the type of energy that you need on this side of the ball.
Kurt.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, a lot of the difficulties of the defense early on was the big push in the middle, and those guys, Poe and them, were just getting beat up. And so maybe they found some guys now. Hopefully Gallimore's the real deal. Even Tristan Hill looked like he was coming on a little bit before he got hurt. So you kind of like what's ahead, but obviously they need more. If they're going to be an improved defense, they've got to be better, stronger up the middle.
Yeah, the one thing I think is that I pay a little bit of attention to when it comes to the defensive tackles is, as Kurt mentioned there with Tristan Hill, before he got hurt, I thought he was playing pretty well, relatively speaking, to how the overall defense was playing. But he showed me some stuff that made me have a different opinion of him than I had coming into the season. And then you factor in Neville Gallimore. I actually look at this 3 technique position, and I'm looking at it saying, I kind of like what I got there. I got some young players that I think can continue to develop that might be pretty good. I still think they need a big, just nasty, one technique. Somebody they can just put at the nose that can just take up space. They need that guy.
It up.
Hamilton has been pretty good in some of these situations, but I think they need some help there. But I guess I say all that to say I actually look at the defensive tackle position and I feel a little bit better about it. And I know this is going to come somewhat as a surprise than I do at the linebacker position. I think their linebacker position, they need some help. I would not personally go into next season relying on Jalen Smith being a starter for me. Jalen Smith, and I know you can't get rid of his contract right now, but I would go into next year with Jalen Smith.
Say it with your chest in.
I would say Jalen Smith would be a backup for me. And I look at Van Der Esch, and here's the deal. Here's the deal with Van Der Esch. Can you really rely on the fact he's going to be healthy for a full season? So I think you're going to have to really rethink that. Is Sean Lee even coming back? Like, there are questions that every single linebacker you have on your team right now, in my opinion, that's the position on defense that they better pay some attention to this offseason. If not for next year, then for future years, because you just don't know what's going to happen with that position. There's a lot of question marks there. And I don't think anybody believes that Jalen Smith is going to play out this entire contract playing as he's played thus far. So you definitely got to do something with that position. What do you guys think about that?
I got a question for you, D.
Sure.
I like your thinking. I totally agree. I don't think that these guys have played nowhere near up to par. And I give them a little bit of a chance. I'll give them a little bit of grace simply because this defensive line has been so bad.
Right.
And when your defensive line is bad, your linebackers are going to be bad. It's just how it is. However, I want to pose this question: Jalen Smith, do you like his play over Joe Thomas's play? Because I think that Joe Thomas was balling. And he really gave these guys an opportunity and a chance during those games where we were getting scraped up the first half of the year. Joe Thomas was playing, and I think that he got benched simply because of how much he's getting paid versus the other guys.
I actually like Joe Thomas as a player, and I think Joe Thomas is a guy that you see this all the time on teams. There are guys that just don't make enough splash plays, so people just, and especially at certain positions, linebackers, one of those positions. If you're not making the splash play, if you're not making the tackle for a loss, if you're not making the pass defenses, then people kind of miss you. Like, they don't really notice you as much. But I think he was about as solid as any of those other guys, and quite frankly, I think he gave up he had fewer bad plays than Jalen did. I think he was an average to a little bit above average player, but I think the fact of the matter was he wasn't having all the mistakes that Jalen had on top of that. And so for me, I agree with you. I think Joe Thomas is a guy I would definitely keep as a part of my mix. And by the way, I'm not saying they're going to get rid of Jalen. They can't. I don't think financially it makes sense.
No.
I do think, though,
not with that contract.
Yeah, I do think, though, it's one thing to have a guy on your team because of the money. It's a whole different thing how you use him. And so I think based on what they've seen so far, I would be shocked if they go into next year saying he is definitely our starter at linebacker, because I just think that he hasn't given you a reason to make that kind of decision. All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we'll keep going through some of these conversations around the defense. Particularly, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the guys that are going to be free agents and what you guys would do with them after the season. We'll do that when we come right back. This is DallasCowboys.com radio.
We're back with a tasty treat that's sweeping airwaves and taste buds. It's new Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda's here. A new combo that's music to my ears, okay. Let's play. Cream Soda and Dr. Pepper time. Pour it in a glass of ice.
Ah, music to my ears and mouth. New Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda.
A delicious duet.
There's nothing as unique as our eyes, which is why Essilor pioneers ways to make lenses as unique as you. Verilux for super sharp vision, Essential Blue for protection, and Crizal for freedom from glare. 3 cutting-edge solutions in a single unique lens. So whatever your needs, insist on Essilor. Visit your local Essilor experts and find the perfect lens for you. See more, do more, Essilor.
The Cowboys way, where 16 Hall of Famers and 5 championships shows us what success looks like. Where turkey is always the second best part of Thanksgiving Day. Where we are all defined by one single thing, the star. Where we as fans know it's our job to keep the tradition going. Bank of America is proud to be the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys and to support the quest of living life the Cowboys way. Copyright 2020, Bank of America Corporation.
Dear, it's 1908. Don't you think we should get electricity?
And stop using candles to see at night.
It's just electricity lights up the room fast. It's more reliable than candles blowing out, and people seem to love it nationwide.
Well, candles are...
Dear, did you just run into the wall?
Nope. May I have a new candle, please?
Historically, switching to new technology is a no-brainer. Today, it's AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure, and nationwide. Switch to AT&T 5G. It's not complicated. 5G requires compatible plan. May not be in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
Back to the break.
Are you craving AT&T Stadium's famous Cowboys cheesesteak or nachos or Cowboy Rita when you're watching the Cowboys game at home? Bring your favorite stadium fare to you. Place your order online for pickup at AT&T Stadium every week this season. Check out the menu at attstadium.com/at-home. All right, let's jump back in this final segment.
All right.
Did you have something?
Hold on now. Hold on.
All right.
Yeah, you dropped this Jalen Smith bomb on us. That's great. So, okay, there's my question. Here's my question for you.
All right.
I agree that I think he's bad in coverage. And I don't know, is there a way to use that position in a different way, use him in a different way where maybe he's not exposed in that regard? I mean, again, he's second leading tackler in the NFL. I mean, where would this team be without him is my question.
Yeah,
I mean,
bad defenses get
I
a lot
agree
of tackles.
that maybe that's true. When you have bad defensive line, I guess the linebackers are going to get a lot of tackles. But, maybe Isaiah's right. Maybe if Joe Thomas had more playing time, he would stand out. But I guess I fall into the camp of, if he was better, he would be playing more. And maybe he's one of those guys that he's good for 30 snaps, but you put him in for 60 snaps, maybe he gets overexposed. So can they use Jalen in a different way?
Well, I would actually say that maybe that's that logic you use on Joe Thomas may be the better logic for Jalen. Is Jalen a better player at 30 snaps a game, right? Because what I see from Jalen, and I just, again, I'm not a football coach. I ain't play past high school. So just take that as you will. But the way I look at it
he was a beast, though.
I was a beast. But no, the way you look at that, though, is I think for a linebacker, you got to first be able to, through your study, understand what could possibly be coming at you based upon what you're seeing. Number 2, you got to be able to read and react really, really quickly. And number 3, you got to get to the play. And I think when you look at those 3 things, I just don't think Jalen's doing a great job there. I think way too often we see Jalen get tricked by a play, Way too often we see Jalen get out of position on a play. Way too often we see Jalen react too slow to a play. And a lot of those situations where he ends up getting blocked by an offensive lineman, it's because he's out of position, or it's because he didn't diagnose the play as he should have, and then it leaves him in a very vulnerable situation, and then he can't get out of it because he can't get off the block. So, again, I just overall, I don't think Jalen has been great this year. I don't think he's been good this year. And I know he has a lot of tackles. And by the way, when you think about just the fundamentals of tackling, I don't think Jalen's a bad tackler. I just don't think Jalen does the things to get him in position to make the tackle enough, right? And it's all the negative plays. It may not even be the plays he actually makes the tackle. It's all the negative plays that end up being a long touchdown because he was out of position or because he couldn't get off a block to be able to fill a gap that he should have filled, right? So that's where my problem is with Jalen, and I think the Cowboys need to address that position in the offseason.
I guess I hope that if he can get a stronger defensive front, if he's got maybe Van Der Esch handling some of those lining guys up duties and all that, maybe if he has a better surrounding cast, he'll be able to just not think and go play. But who knows? That may be wishful thinking.
I mean, we do know that going into the season, the plan was supposedly that he was going to be playing weak side linebacker with Leighton in at middle linebacker, and maybe that would have helped him. Maybe that would have freed him up a little bit more. Who knows? But all that being said, I just don't think he has fulfilled the role as he should have as a guy being paid as much as he has, and as the self-proclaimed leader of this defense. I just don't think he's filled that role very well. All right, let's move on to the next question. What would you guys do with these free agents? I'm going to throw out a name at you, and I want you to tell me whether you keep them or whether you let them walk. Let's start first with Cheeto. Barry, you're up.
Man, I'm kind of biased on this one because, I mean, me and Cheeto, we got the same agent and everything. So for me, I'm gonna say keep him.
He's gonna get paid either way, whether he's here or somewhere else. He's gonna get paid.
Okay, all right.
You know he's gonna play in the NFL next year.
All right, so since you put it that way, I'm going to say give the guy a chance to walk. Clearly, you got Trayvon Diggs here, and I think he's going to end up being your number one corner going forward. So for me, let Cheeto walk. Maybe he'll get more money out there on the open market. He's a solid corner. I just think he needed more reps and more experience out there. But for me, I'm going to have to let him walk and see if we can get in the draft.
Isaiah.
I said it's cheaper to keep it, that boy. I said it's cheaper to keep her. I said you gotta keep him, man. I don't think that you want this secondary going into next year without any veterans. You just not something that you want to do. I don't think you want to put that pressure on Diggs. He's faced enough this year in terms of pressure as he's had to face a number one receiver every single week. He's done, obviously he's getting better in that regard, but you would feel real good knowing that you have a healthy Cheeto, hopefully, and Diggs coming back with a year of experience underneath his belt. I think that you will feel really good about that. And then we still haven't seen doggone Robinson. Where the heck is Robinson at, man? I'm looking for him.
Really?
Where's he at? He's out there collecting a check right now, just practicing. But I look forward to seeing him play as well. And I know they're working him in at safety. That's what the word is. But I think you feel good with Cheeto and Diggs coming back healthy and experienced.
Kurt.
Yeah, I agree with you, Isaiah. It scares me to let go a cornerback, with this team. Diggs looks like he's going to be a stud. But after that, Anthony Brown's been a little bit hit and miss. And like Barry said earlier, Jordan Lewis is a free agent. So, it would scare me. I wouldn't throw the bank at him, but man, I'd be scared to let him go.
All right, let's move on to Alden Smith. Let's start with you, Isaiah. Alden Smith.
Oh, you better hurry up and sign Alden. You better sign him, man. Sign him because he's going to kill you if he goes out somewhere else and balls out. I know it's hard to get a beat on him emotionally as far as where he's at, but he's a solid player. He's a solid player, and it's hard to find solid defensive ends in this league. They come and go, but when you have one, he probably has a couple years left in him. Secure him, lock him up, don't let him go.
Kurt.
Yeah, I agree. He's shown that he's made the comeback, and you like where he's headed. And it seems like he has a good setting here in Dallas. It's comfortable. If you weren't going to keep him, if you can't sign him, then you might look back and say, why didn't we trade him? But for right now, yeah, let's get him re-signed.
Barry.
For me, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit on this one. I'm going to say let him walk. walk. I thought, maybe they could have got something for him during the trade deadline, but they didn't reach out there for him to do that. I say let him walk. The first 3 games he was on fire. He was destroying offenses. He was constantly in the backfield, but he kind of tapered off. He kind of plateaued a little bit as we're going through this season. So for me, I think his price tag might be a little high as well. So for me, I'm gonna let him walk.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider here is what happens with. I think the other thing to consider here is what happens with Randy Gregory down the stretch. If Randy Gregory continues to play as he's played these last couple games, then the Cowboys may look at that and say, hey, we think with him and with Tank, and if Bradley and I, if they're seeing some things from Bradley and I that make them think he might be a player in the future, then they may look at it and say that for the money they have to pay Alden, it's not really worth it. But I think there's a lot to be said about what's going to happen at that position down the stretch, and those guys are playing for contracts next year. Let's move on to the safety, Xavier Woods. Let's start with you, Kurt. What would you do with Xavier Woods?
Well, I heard Nick talk about him this morning, and I kind of agree that he's just been kind of a neutral guy. I mean, he's not given up a ton of great, bad plays, but he hasn't actually made a lot of great plays either. He's just been kind of there. And so my worry with him is you got nothing after him, really. So I think I'd try to bring him back, but I wouldn't pay him a lot because they're just so thin at safety right now.
Yep. Isaiah.
Let him go. Let him go. Yeah, I mean he's a good player. As Kurt said, he's a good player. No disrespect to him, but I think there's others out there. I think there's others out there, and there's probably others that are coming out of college that can have probably the same effectiveness for a lot less money.
Barry, as a guy that has made a living in the NFL as a safety, before you answer the question, I want you to give me your assessment of Xavier Woods. What does he do well? What does he not do well?
Well, what I've seen from him, what he does well, it seems that the deep part of the field, he's a good as far as patrolling the deep part of the field. He doesn't really let much things go over top of his head when he's just the middle of the field safety. Yeah. Now, when he's in coverage, we've seen him struggle a little bit this season, especially last week when he was in coverage against Juju Smith-Schuster. I believe they were in a cover 4 type of scheme, and he kind of got spent around like a top, and it was a kind of an easy touchdown for Juju. So I would like to see him step up his coverage game a lot, because that's what gives you the big bucks. That's what makes you the money, is when you're able to do multiple things. You're like a hybrid. You can cover in the deep part of the field, but you can also lock down on slots and do things of that nature. So for me, overall, I'm going to have to say this is a tough one, but depending on his price, I would like to keep him because, like Kurt said, behind him, I don't really see anything. I mean, you got Darian Thompson there, but we all know he's not the answer. So for me, I'm going to have to say keep him, but depending on his price.
All right. So I got this final question for y'all, and I understand. I'm going to preface this by saying I understand this question. We could do a whole show on it, but we got 3 minutes, so actually 2 minutes. So we're going to see what we can do in 2 minutes on this one because I'm not going to get y'all back the next time we do a show. So understanding that the defense has a lot of areas that it's going to have to fix this offseason. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys currently sit as the 3rd pick in the NFL draft. Assuming things go as they go and the Cowboys move up to 1 or 2 in the draft, would you, A, take Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, or 2, or B, would you trade back in order to get more draft picks to be able to help rebuild your defense? I'm going to start first with you, Isaiah.
Trade back. Grab, get as much talent as you can. You did an okay job this year. Obviously, I think they did a good job this year acquiring talent. I think just some of the talent we just haven't seen because they're developing. But I think that you do that. You use that high pick should you get it, and you acquire a couple 2nd and 3rd round guys instead of trying to just grab a top 10 guy.
All right, Kurt.
Yeah, I think I would trade back as well. Dak Prescott should be the quarterback going forward, so I wouldn't want to start over with a new guy. But I don't think I'd trade too far back because I want a defensive stud. They need a playmaker. They need a difference maker on that defense. And so I'm not sure I would trade out of the top 10 because I want a guy who can make an immediate impact right away. So. Trade back, get you the best defensive guy available.
And thing to know about that is sometimes just trading back a little bit doesn't mean you can still get that stud, but you can still get a ransom for 2 or 3 spots when you're that high in the draft because teams are trying to get up for those 2 quarterbacks. What you got, Barry?
Yeah, for me, I'm gonna have to say trade back. I mean, you can get a lot of draft picks in there. There's a stud linebacker from Penn State in the top 10. I mean, you got the corner from Alabama and Surtain that you can also get as well. So for me, I think you got the quarterback of your future in Dak. So I'd trade back on this one.
So you guys agree? You agree with me, Barry? We got to get rid of Jalen and get another linebacker. Is that what you're saying?
Hey, the guy from Penn State's a stud, man.
I'm just saying. All right, man. Hey, that's a wrap, man. I really appreciate you guys joining me this week. We had a lot of fun, and don't be a stranger, man. If you ever want to come jump over, I can push somebody off the break anytime to pull you in. So feel free to let me know, Kurt. Especially you. I know this has been different for you to actually have a host on your show, but yeah, we love having you over. And anytime you guys want to come back, just let me know. Yeah. And we'll
appreciate you.
We'll start back up next week. We're gonna have no shows, no podcasts on Thursday or Friday this week, but we'll be back to our normals cast, our normal times, starting next Monday. Till then, for Isaiah Stanback, Barry Church, Kurt Daniels, I'm Derek Eagleton. This has been The Break, live on DallasCowboys.com radio.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?